Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Forethought, a podcast series dedicated to raising awareness about mental health and well-being through lived experience stories. So today I'm joined by Ben Alexander to talk about the importance of energy management when it comes to both physical and mental health. So Ben, thanks for joining us today. How you doing?
Yeah, good, mate. Good. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
No, it's all good. And I know we were just saying before, you've been a very busy man at the moment. So maybe we can kind of start off by congratulating you about making, Running for Resilience into an official charity. That's so incredible. And the work that you guys are doing is amazing. But yeah, what else have you kind of been working on at the moment?
I launched a personal site. So I've been doing some wellbeing talks. I started doing them when I was at KPMG. Just they got myself and another elite athlete who was a retired cyclist, and we get up and start doing talks, and they went really well. And people were saying they were getting, yeah, they were finding them useful, hearing stories from like sporting background and some stuff we learned in high performance sport and how that sort of related to office life. So people found that interesting. And then the start of the year, a mate asked me to come do a talk, like a paid talk at his like co-working space that he runs, and that went really well. Had just great feedback. So keen to sort of take it to a new level and do more. So launch my site. Doing my first talk at Braidwood Rugby Club next month, so that'll be really cool. But that's more probably just a rugby talk, more so.
Yeah.
But so it's a sort of exciting new chapter.
I'm quite interested, I guess, like that seems like a fairly unnatural translation from sort of, high performance in the rugby field into, I guess, KPMG and that high performance office culture. But maybe it actually makes a lot more sense than I think it does. Like, would you be able to what are your thoughts, I guess? Or like, do you think people just enjoyed it a lot because they're just real stories? Like you were just getting up there and being really authentic and sort of unpacking how it is and people resonated with that?
Well, after about a year in the office, like KPMG was my first office job, I finally did realize there's actually no different to like achieving things in the office as there is on the sporting field. And a lot of it comes down to just doing things that sort of give you the energy to do the work, to do the hard work, which then gets you the results, gets the job done or win the game, whatever it is. And I'd sort of learned that the hard way with early in my about halfway through my footy career. So like at the start, I used to focus really hard on training hard, and I'd come to training and I just focus on pushing myself really hard, and then I'd fall into a heap outside of training. I'd just sort of not care what I was eating because I was really stressed from training hard and sort of neglected food and sleep. And then eventually we had a trainer come along. So for any of those who don't know, I used to play for the Brumbies, which is an Australian rugby union team. And we were the best Australian provincial side. We had a bit of a decline. Up the Canberrans and the Brumbies. So, we had a bit of a decline, and we still had a really experienced side, but we ended up coming second last. New coach was signed, and he moved on a lot of senior players. We had a really young squad, and he got this trainer in who was an ex hurdler and named Dean Benton, and he worked with a lot of the rugby league clubs, and so really probably the super experienced guy in rugby around like human performance. And he just drilled into us. I was really worried he was going to just focus on like push us really hard at training, which he did, but he was making an example of me because I'd gone from being one of the youngest guys in the group to one of the oldest when a lot of the senior players had been moved on. So it was sort of new for me. And he'd make me train really hard he'd flog me to sort of set an example to the younger guys. And I remember going up to him one day, this is probably only a few weeks into training under him, and I went up to him and said, "Dean, I'm training as hard as I can. I just can't keep this up." And he just snapped back straight away and said, "Mate, I don't care how hard you're training. Go away and focus on your eating and your sleeping, and your training will take care of itself." And I was a bit like, "Oh, okay." So instead of putting that effort into like trying to train hard, I redirected into trying to eat a bit better, making sure I got sleep. And he created a great environment to do that. So we had a chef that would cook us breakfast and lunch. We'd come in, have breakfast together, we'd train, and we'd have lunch together. And then he created a sleep room so none of the staff could bother us. So we'd have a little nap in the afternoon, then we'd go train again. And we went from second last to 2 years later, we were winning the grand final in New Zealand with 10 minutes to go against the Chiefs. We leaked a couple of late tries and lost that grand final, but that turnaround was just the main lesson, how we turned it around so quickly. That was just something that really is the main lesson I sort of reflect on looking back
Yeah.
on my career. And so that was sort of the main thing I talked about in those talks, was around, managing your energy levels. When you're feeling flat, what are, what are the things you can do to sort of boost your energy? And that, so a lot of people saw a few similarities in their work, where they'd come to work and they'd focus on smashing out heaps of emails and doing reports, and just do, and then they'd get home and they'd just put on Netflix, or they'd stay up late or whatever to deal with the stress. And then they'd come into work tired and they'd do not great work, and then that would cause stress, and they'd get stuck in this really vicious cycle. So, and the best athletes, all the best players I played with, were meticulous with their nutrition, go to bed on time, like they would do all the stuff. Like, what people think work is just when they're at their desk, or when we're just on the footy field. The teams that won footy were the teams that did the most away from the field, that were the most professional on the weekends, or the bye week when there wasn't a game. Were they out getting pissed, blind drunk, or were they doing extra training because they'd slept well and they had the energy to go and do the extra training? So I do sort of think, my message is getting misinterpreted. It's not about not working hard. It's about prioritizing the energy, or prioritizing the things that will give you the energy to work hard for a long period of time. Because we all know results come from consistency over a long period of time. And if we and I'm as guilty as anyone, I used to just white knuckle it and just try and go as hard as I can and try and get all the work done and push really hard. And then I just fall into a heap. Couldn't be consistent. I couldn't keep it up for the long haul. For me, focusing on nutrition was the real big one. Nutrition and sleep made a huge difference to my, not just, got in shape and got in the best shape I've ever been in, but also like my mental health was just a lot better. I was just more positive. I was prouder of the work I was producing. Like I was just in a better frame of mind when I had more energy. And then like on the flip side, noticed that my thoughts would be a lot more negative, and I'd be harsh on myself when I was tired. I was like trying to, I don't know, I've just noticed it over a long time. I'm getting a bit old, but I do notice that my thoughts now definitely just get more negative, or I just don't problem solve as well. And when I'm just a bit tired, and I think that's pretty common I think there'd be some sort of biochemistry reason for it, that our brains just don't function as well as they do when they're fully charged and we've had a good night's sleep. Like, man, I'm so dumb if I haven't had a good night's sleep. Like I do feel like I can do good stuff and produce good work when I've had a good sleep, but if I haven't, but the thing that I sort of really learned in retirement and transitioning out of sports, so it was very much while I was playing, focus on that physical energy, like sleep, nutrition, to be able to go out and push yourself on the training field. But then sort of, we can touch on it, that learned along the way that there's more to your energy levels than just nutrition, sleep. Learned through the pandemic around how much community and relationships, how much energy that gives me, being around good people when I was locked in home and couldn't see my friends. Learned a lot of so I have a pub, and we had a really rough patch during the pandemic, shut down. And before I went to KPMG, I'd really sort of burnt out after the 2 years of the pub just being impacted, and I was trying to get a startup going at the same time. So that's what sort of led me to go do something different, was I'd burnt out. But that experience really taught me that I had some ways of thinking patterns that were draining my energy. Because even during the pandemic, I was sleeping perfectly, I was eating well, I was exercising every day, but I still didn't feel great. And I learned that I'd developed some, just some ways of thinking, a lot of fears that I wasn't dealing with that was draining my energy. Being overly critical on myself was draining energy. The list goes on, especially in ruminating. That was sort of another big one, just going around and around in circles, was really wasting a lot of this energy that I had and wasn't. Because I think you'd be the same, mate. Most people we get tons of energy and we feel good when we make progress on things, no matter whether it's work or whether it's getting fit on getting our park run time down or our bench press up or whatever. Just making progress on things is something that is like fundamental to human happiness. And ruminating is probably the number one thing that just stops progress, dead in its tracks, being stuck inside my head.
Yeah, so like that's quite interesting. So even though you were ruminating and having those kind of stressful feelings, you were still managing to sleep all right. Is that but you're very lucky.
Yeah, but I was like I was so like anal or rigid around. I just couldn't. If I didn't have a good night's sleep, I fell into a heap. I was so miserable. My mental health was struggling the whole next day. So I was going to bed at like 7, like just going to bed and shutting down like 7 a.m. Sorry, 7 p.m. and leaving my wife to sort of put the kids to bed. And I wasn't really very helpful, but I'm very lucky I had a supportive wife.
Yeah.
Who goes to bed a bit, has always gone to bed a bit later than me. So she was so good at supporting me through that. But
because I think that's definitely the way. So like, you know, when I get really stressed, I ruminate as well. And it's like this weird thing in your head where you're like, yeah, I can think myself out of this stress is like, and so I'll lie in bed and I'll just be staring at the ceiling and my mind will just be going at a million miles an hour. And that's something that's taken me like over 2 years to start to like bring into line and sort of train myself to be like, if you stay up all night stressing about this thing, you're just going to be even more tired the next day and then be even less equipped to actually resolve the thing that you've been thinking about. So I don't know, like that, and that comes back very much to office culture or work culture, right? Because most of those stresses are things that happen during the day. So I'd be super keen to get your take on it, coming back to like energy is like, that's my situation. A lot of people listening to this probably have a very similar situation. Like, how do you snap this cycle of, you know, like thinking about things on repeat? Like, how do you break out of that? Do you have any sort of tips?
I mean, for me, it's writing.
Okay.
Just writing about what's in my head helps me realize that I'm probably being ridiculous. But sleep is okay. So it is like a bit of a catch-22. Like if you're ruminating, but you need sleep to break out of it. Having like a wind down routine like really helps me. Like making sure I've got everything out of my head that I need to do the next day. Whatever it is, if there's a problem, I write it in. I'll tackle that tomorrow, so I won't forget, and so my brain can sort of relax, knowing that I'm not going to forget about it. And then there was a period where I was sleeping with like a pen and paper next to my bed, and if I woke up during the night, I might have an idea for how to solve that problem. I'd quickly jot it down, and then my brain could relax because I'd captured the thought.
That's really interesting.
So yeah, that, and that's what the brain's ruminating. It's trying to like come up with an answer. But I've found, yeah, often the easiest way to find answers is to talk to people about the problems and use their brains to. People really do want to help, and talking about issues. Yeah, you get their brain involved, and they might come up with a really obvious answer, or they might ask you a question that might send your brain down a different path that comes up with the answer. But yeah, I've just found any like challenges or anything, I've found like just writing about it and then trying to forget about it and go do something, go for a hike or go spend time with friends. And then often like the next day when I'm in the shower, like the answer will just come to me. Like I'll go and put the problem in my subconscious, and then it just sort of pops up when you least expect it. So it's pretty, but again, I just try and focus on making sure I'm feeling good, because I know that I'll be more likely to solve the problem if I'm feeling good. Like I've got energy, I've been looking after myself. Whereas if I'm just stressed beyond belief, and just hanging on, like I might come up with an answer, but it's probably not the best answer I could come up with. Stress gives us tunnel vision, and when it like our pupils dilate, and that's why we can't that's why I liked tracking what I ate, was because it helped. Like, yeah, that's what tunnel vision gives you. When you're stressed, you can only just see like the meal in front of you, and you struggle to actually like zoom out. And that's like one thing we learned about what stress does to the body, especially like in big games.
So what, you just like literally your brain just forgets about all of the other stuff. It kind of just makes it blurry, and you just go
you're just so focused on one thing in front of you. That's tunnel vision, and that's what happens to everyone when we get stressed. And you can see it in the office. People they're stressed, and all they can see is the email in front of them, and they can't like actually step back and go, I don't actually need to reply to this. This email's irrelevant, like because they can't see everything. Oh, I've got actually something I should be doing over there, and something that they're stressed, and then it actually like makes your pupil. Huberman's talked about it. Makes sure your pupils dilate, and you just in a fight or flight. There's all that scientific stuff around our stress response.
Yeah, it's quite interesting. I've got a golden rule now, which I only put in place by finding out the hard way, is like I don't reply or check my emails after 4 o'clock on a Friday anymore. Because if it came in at 4 o'clock on a Friday, it can wait until 8 a.m. on Monday. And the emails that come in at 4 o'clock on a Friday are always the ones that are going to ruin your weekend.
Yep. Yeah, just don't look at them.
Now I just don't look at them. And then people are like, you're going to look at that? I'm like, nah, because if it's that important, they'll call me on repeat until I pick up. And if it's not that important that they're not calling me until the weekend, then I'm going to go and I'm going to have a nice weekend and I'm going to come back on Monday and deal with it. And that was something I only implemented about 4 or 5 months ago. And it made such a big difference, but it was so easy.
Yeah, I've been just leaving the computer in the office just so I can't even look at it.
Yeah, no, that's also very smart. And good on you for setting boundaries.
The All Blacks led the charge around understanding, educating the players to understand why they kept choking. They choked at the 99 World Cup, the 03 World Cup, even though being favourites. And so before the 07 World Cup, they pulled all their players out of Super Rugby to get them fitter than ever. They thought it was fitness was the issue. And then they get to the World Cup quarterfinal in 07 against France, and they choked and lost. And so New Zealand finally, Richie McCaw led it there that they finally faced up to that they weren't good under pressure. And they got a psychologist, a mental skills coach in, and a psychologist to teach and educate the players what stress does to the body. Heart rate goes up. And it's something I really struggled with in my career. I would either get really fired up or I'd be really relaxed. And actually performance is somewhere in the middle. It's being switched on and focused, but not stressed. That's kind of and so they taught them skills how to find that balance where they say bodies on fire, heads in the fridge or something, or bodies in the oven, heads in the fridge, trying to find that the All Blacks call it the blue zone. And then they trained all the players to have if they caught themselves going into red, getting too fired up, they all had their own little reset buttons. Richie McCaw would stump his foot, or someone would clap their hand, or someone would go just stare at the black dot on the goalpost. Kieran Reid, I think, looked at the black dot just for a second or two, just as okay, reset now. What am I doing? Just to
and
get back.
Coming out of the tunnel vision, right? It's tunnel vision's on. Stare at this black dot and the thing, and then you kind of look at the crowd and you're like, oh, okay, there's all this other stuff going on around. Let's go back into the battle, I suppose. That's super interesting.
Because you want to be amped up, especially in a contact sport. You do need the adrenaline pumping so you can put hits on and run through walls, but you still want to make good decisions. And that requires, and that's where I think the hardest thing for sport was trying to find that balance between being relaxed, but fired up. And I was either one or the other. I very rarely found that middle. And when I did, I don't actually probably know how I did, but I definitely played my best when I was in the middle.
Yeah, right. And I suppose that's probably towards the end where you're people spend their entire careers trying to find that middle, and some people find it earlier than others, and maybe that's why they become the best.
Well, it helps when the leaders have found it, and then that sort of radiates through the group.
Yeah.
And they were calm and focused and switched on but focused. That sort of mental state does sort of resonates through groups. Yeah. So when leaders found it, but I played under leaders who are really fired up and some were too relaxed. But I think the same definitely relates to work as well. But
how do you kind of go about finding those things that help you counterintuitively sometimes get more energy by actually kind of expending energy, if you will?
Investing energy into
and you get it back.
Spend it on you spend your energy on just something frivolous and crap, or you can invest the energy on something that's going to give you energy in return. So it's very similar to money. I sort of think a lot about trying not to end up in a state where I'm super stressed. So we started doing it while I was playing. So I got an Oura ring here. So I track my heart rate variability. So that was something we'd do while I was playing. We'd come in towards the end of my career. As the sports science had sort of said, heart rate variability is probably the best sign of your energy, which is really, energy is just a word of saying your nervous system, the health of your nervous system. If your nervous system's healthy, relaxed, your energy's high. If your nervous system's shot, your energy is pretty low. And so heart rate variability is the, sort of in the sporting world, the gold standard for what the state of your nervous system. And so we were doing it with rugby. We'd come into training in the morning. We'd put a big vest on back in the day. We'd all lie there as a group for a minute, and the physio or the team doctor would get everyone's scores. And if everyone's heart rate variability was down, they'd go, everyone's pretty fatigued. We'll make training a bit lighter today. But if everyone's heart rate variability was up, he'd tell the coach, yep, go ahead with your plan. The boys are ready to go. And they'd go and, we'd get on with training as per usual. So we loved it as players because we didn't have to go up to the doctor and say, "Oh, doc, I'm not feeling great." Like, you'd feel a bit weak about it, but he could just see. He could see your nervous system shot, and very quickly he could see the average of the groups, so they could gauge where everyone was at. So yeah, they knew when to ease up and not push us over the edge, sort of thing. Because once blokes got injured or burnt out, it's months till you can get people back. So it was always this balancing act in sport of pushing people to train hard enough, but not pushing them too far where they fall off the edge. Because it was always, I mean, when the Brumbies won, I think they had one injury that year. When the Waratahs won the title in 2014, they only had one or two injuries. So, like, usually the healthiest, there's exceptions to the rule with, like, the Crusaders that have won it the last few years. You know, they've had tons of injuries and still won, but that's just because, you know, the culture of and stacked with talent. But in Australia, where we don't have the same depth, we've had success when teams have been healthy and had low injury counts. So that was such a huge role for the head of performance to find that balance with coaches, because coaches would always want us to train harder and do more, but the trainers were always in charge for managing training loads and recovery and all that. So yeah, Dean Benton, who I spoke about earlier, I remember, you know, he'd blow up at the coach if training went over what the allocated was. He'd know how everyone's health was, and it'd be a 45-minute session, and we'd hit 45, and he'd start blowing up at the coach, going, "They're out here too long." Like, and he put it back on the coach, saying they weren't organised enough to run a good session. Like, he wasn't. Wow. It was so, which was awesome as a player, having the trainer who you think's supposed to tell you, you know, go harder and suck it up and stop being a pussy. He was actually incredible. He was hard on me. Like, when I was eating crap outside of training, like, he'd come down with like a ton of bricks and he'd make me keep a food diary, because he said I wasn't connecting the dots between what I was eating and how I was performing. But back to, the heart rate variability, that's something anyone can do. Like, pretty much any Garmin, Apple Watch, I think Apple Watches do them, Whoops. The technology's there where now anyone can sort of track the heart rate variability and start to see the warning signs. So now when my heart rate variability starts to drop, so high heart rate variability is good. It's not the same as resting heart rate. So it's the variability between beats. So if your heart rate is beep, 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 like very consistent, that actually means you're really fatigued and your nervous system, your body's just trying to hang in there. But if you're nervous, if your heart rate is beep, 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 like a bit all over the place, that's actually a sign that your nervous system's is relaxed and in a good spot. So it's counterintuitive to heart rate, but it's heart rate variability. So high is good, and we all have different natural variations. Like, some people are higher than others, but anyone can do things to get their heart rate variability up. So that's like a really concrete thing that anyone can do. And once you've been doing it for a while and you notice your heart rate variability start to drop, you can go, "Oh, okay, I'm starting to get a bit close to the edge now, and I can pull back on the things that are causing stress and give yourself a bit more time to recharge and recover."
So I guess, what does that look like for the everyday punter? Like, things that might be able to give me that increased variability. Is that like, you know, daily exercise and kind of getting the good sleep and like trying to get out in nature and relax?
Time with friends, exercise with friends is the thing. Like, exercise with friends is, and that's what Running for Resilience is based on. Like, so we know exercise is good for us and we know spending time is good for us, but if you do them together, it's just like, it's magical. It is as close to a silver bullet for mental health that I've found to get my energy levels back up, is to just do some exercise with mates. It's what I think every athlete struggles in retirement, is that, you know, you get paid, especially team sport athletes, you know, you get paid to exercise with your friends all day. Travel to with your mates, some of your best mates, and then transitioning off that and not getting that daily hit of exercise with friends. You don't realise it at the time, but I sort of realised it in the first sort of 6 months after retiring, when I wasn't feeling great. My energy was really low. I was fatigued or very foggy. But every Saturday at 8 a.m. was park run, and I'd go do that with my other mates that lived in Canberra. We'd all meet, we'd do the 5K together, and we'd go have breakfast. And I'd go like, "Oh, feel pretty good here." Like, I actually feel like how I used to feel when I was playing. So that was sort of how it really hit home for me. And so 50 weeks after I retired, I did my 50th park run and wrote a little thank you blog. Thanks to parkrun, it really helped me during that transition retiring. And my grandmother died around the same time, who I was really close with. And I'm not sure if you had Brainy on. Have you had
Yeah, we've had a chat with Brainy about, so that was awesome.
Yeah, so Brainy saw that. Well, Canberra Times shared the blog, and Brainy saw it, and we didn't know each other. I mean, he was a Brumbies fan and Wallabies fan, and so he read the article and he could relate to it, losing his dad to suicide, and his mum had just been diagnosed with terminal cancer, so he could relate to like losing pillars in life. So for me, rugby and my grandmother were two. My grandmother was really a pillar of my life. I'd spent a lot of time with her when I was young, and rugby really gave me structure and routine in my weeks. And having them gone was, was a big, big time. But yeah, Brandy saw it, emailed the doc, said, "Oh, hi, I'm Matt Breen. Can we do a one-off run for mental health called Running for Resilience?" And the doc said, "Yeah, no worries. We'll shout everyone a beer and pizza." And the next Wednesday night, we did it, and we finished the run. We're supposed to do a one-off run, and we're having the beer and pizza at the end. And I go to Brandy, we go, "This is pretty good. Let's do it again next week." And then we did next week, and 25 people rocked up. So sorry, 20 came to the first one, then 25 came. And anyway, fast forward 4.5 years. I know we're here not to talk about running for resilience, but
it's important.
That's that exercising with friends is, I found, the number one thing for me to boost my energy, other than sleep and eating well and time with family. Getting out in nature. I can see you got lots of bush and nature behind you, which is really nice. So I find when I go out to my parents' property, that really recharges me, and then exercising with friends. But I'm really keen to hear, what do you do when you feel like you're...
I was going to say, like, you even notice that, like, I'm no elite athlete by any means. These hamstrings aren't what they used to be. But when you go to the gym and, like, either if it's a circuit, you do like a HIIT circuit or a CrossFit circuit, as soon as you know someone else in the class and you have a chat before you start or during, you get way better results than if you go by yourself. Like, I don't know, that's obviously that psychology of kind of like doing stuff with other people, but it's fascinating. Like, as soon as you know, and then you kind of form these, like, at the gym, you're like, "Oh, cool, I've never had a chat with you, you're not friends," but like over the months you actually become like gym buddies. Or, if you go for a walk around, I don't know, in Sydney up here along the beach or the river or whatever, or you go to the dog park, like, we've got a bunch of friends now that we've met through just going to the dog park at the same time every day, and now we know the other dogs. In the beginning we had to like get very poignant with, like, not just remembering the dogs' names, like try to remember the dogs' owners' names. So you didn't just go up and be like, "Oh, you're Remy's dad or Remy's mum." But now over time, and it took like a year, but now when I go to the dog park, I've got my morning crew. We talk about the NBA, like we go for loops, like it's pretty awesome. And you're out in nature. So yeah, it kind of touches on those two things that you were talking about. It's kind of like, the dual hit of a bit of exercise and then a bit of socialization, and just taking your mind off whatever's going on during the day is like super important.
Well, it helps you when you're with other people. It helps you stop ruminating, because you're chatting with people, and exercising also helps to stop the ruminating. And there's a scientific reason behind it. Like, so you do the exercise, you get the endorphins, and then like humans are communal animals, and so there's like oxytocin when you're around others, and you're forming bonds, and so you're getting all that feel-good brain chemicals. And then if you go for a run or you do something tough, you get a bit of serotonin, and so it's just a really good cocktail of feel-good brain chemicals when you do that.
I think the other interesting thing you touched on before, which I only learned a couple of years ago, was around the diet and the nutrition part of it. So, been going to the same gym for like 3 years now, and then this trainer changed and we were running this thing, and she's like, we did a challenge, and I beat myself up because I had to come in and tell her I'd eaten a double quarter pounder after going and playing basketball the night before on the way home. So I was running late, and she was like, "Don't let yourself beat yourself up." She's like, "That's high protein. Did you get chips?" I'm like, "No." She's like, "Did you get a Coke?" I'm like, "No, I got a water." So she's like, "You had a high protein burger and you didn't have the sugar associated with it. Don't beat yourself up. Just work hard for the rest of the week and make sure you like even it out." And I was like, "What do you mean?" She's like, "Yeah." And then so I did that for 8 weeks on this different kind of way of thinking about food. And I've never been fitter or stronger or more consistent in my entire life. And I kind of find that quite funny, because we often, when we get tired or stressed, we like eat junk, and then that cycle comes back. But like, eating junk every now and then is okay if it means that you're not going to be stressed about, "Now I have to spend 2 hours making dinner, and that's going to add all these other stresses." Like, Yeah, what's your kind of take on that? Because you'd obviously have a very first-hand experience from obviously being in a situation like at the Brumbies, but like taking that outside of that, what are your takes? I guess, yeah, nutrition, energy, kind of all of that. I'm sure you've
Because
got
I've like tried every diet under the sun, and none of them like. There's all the books now and research on diets don't work, and it's actually like because of all the habit change. Like it's actually really hard to change your habits, especially change if you just overhaul your whole diet. You're changing your breakfast habit, your lunch habit, your dinner habit, your snacks habit. So I yeah, through a lot of trial and error, yeah, trying every diet and not being able to stick to any of them, and then thinking it's me when it's very human. That's actually quite hard to just overhaul your whole diet. I just once as I started focusing on just eating a little bit better consistently, like that was something that really resonated with me, and so I tracked what I ate and helped me just zoom out and look at my eating over the whole week, not oh I had one burger, I therefore failed. Tracking helped me zoom out and look. Oh, Monday, Tuesday I ate well, and Wednesday morning I ate well. Yeah, I had a burger in the evening, but then I ate well on Thursday, Friday, and I had a couple of beers on Saturday. But if I zoom out and look at the week, yeah, it's actually like pretty good week of eating, and it was a bit better than the week before that I ate. So that's really the way out. Tracking, so like we'll say we're tracking heart rate variability or tracking exercise. I find tracking diet something I still do, and I find really useful to help me zoom out and look at the big picture of what I'm eating and to even out what I've eaten over the week, like the trainer said, because she's totally right. Like you have a bit of junk and then you start beating yourself up. That was what I was saying before around energy management, like being hard on yourself is like, yeah, it's just a total waste of energy trying to kick yourself while you're down. And I think I did it to try and like be super hard on myself to try and get myself to get going and be super motivated and all that. And it might get like a short term reaction, but you'll end up falling into a heap again. And then eventually when you fall into a heap again, you feel worse about yourself and you feel like a failure and you just keep heading down and down the
Yeah, I love what you just said about micro habits because that was the other thing this trainer was sort of talking about. It was 8 weeks. Week one was just drink 2 liters of water every day. And I was like, what? She's like, actually notice if you drink 2 liters of water a day. And I noticed, and I was drinking like 2 cups of water a day. And it wasn't until I actually had to write down how much water I had. I was like, oh shit, like, how have I been getting to this point on 2, 3, not even a liter of water a day? And that was week one. She's like, don't change anything else. And then week two is like, keep that, add this other small thing in. And then by the end of the 8 weeks, it was something that I've kept almost to this day. Like, got the trusty water bottle on the desk when you're working from home. But like, yeah, their habits and like building those new ones because I've had the same shitty habits for like 30 years. And
they're hard to change.
You can teach an old dog new.
Zooming out and having like helps you sort of see that and like, yeah, just not trying to be perfect. That's the other thing, like that just, yeah, as soon as anyone's trying to be perfect and eat perfectly or do the perfect workout, they just inevitably fall into a heap. And
yeah, no, I think that's quite interesting. And yeah, with the, love that you've got these talks going. Like I said, I've been a big fan of your writing and stuff for a long time because I think this kind of all leads into this really massive challenge we've got in Australia around burnout. Like it's particularly, in any business, like you're a small business owner too, like you had to go through COVID, like it doesn't just apply to kind of the big corporates, it's everywhere. And I know you were saying you're going to talk at a co-working space, which is brilliant because I think small business owners in particular have this kind of cyclical can't escape work. It's always everywhere. But then when you're stressed, you kind of work suffers and it's hard to get out of it. So I think that burnout conversation, like when you're going and you're talking to people about burnout, and you've got lived experience with it as well. Like, how do you kind of start if how do you even identify maybe you are burnt out? Because you might not even know, right? Like someone might have to tell you. It's quite tough.
Mine at the end of the pandemic, it hit me a ton of bricks when we got out of it. Like once I sort of was in fight or flight mode the whole pandemic. And then right at the end, I fell into a heap of it. It was like my body was just holding all the tension and I just had tunnel vision. And so I didn't realize. And then it just hit me like a ton of bricks at the end of 2021. And it took me about 4 months to get over it. I was in a really, really bad way. But a few things like, yeah, I don't know if people do realize that they're, treading close to the edge. And I was still tracking that's the other thing. I was tracking my heart rate variability and everything during that period. Like I was eating well, but So I was doing all the stuff, but yeah, I still burnt out. And that was when I went and saw, once I hit the wall, the Brumbies, I was in a really bad way, and the Brumbies introduced me to a sports psychologist. And that's when I learned around all these mental ways of thinking that were burning my energy. So like there's the heart rate, really, and then there's like the mental energy stuff that you need that mental energy each day to make progress on work. And I was just going around in circles, stressed. And I'll never forget it, that psychologist, she gave me this sheet of the 12 like negative ways of thinking. And she said, oh, then, I've got the sheet somewhere in the house still. There was like ruminating, looking at things in black and white. Like there was just 12 different things. And I remember looking at it and she goes, how many, do you have any of them? And I had all of them.
Oh,
I was like, fuck, like all of them, like all 12 ways of making a mountain out of a molehill, like catastrophizing. Sorry, that was the term. There's 12 of them. And like easily irritable, just all 12. And then there was, I remember driving home from that psychology appointment, and I remember just like thinking to myself, thinking in those ways is such a waste of energy. And that was just like, I don't know, not a shortcut or just a way. As soon as I started thinking in one of those 12 ways, my brain, I started catching myself going, oh, this is what you're thinking. You're catastrophizing, Ben. That's a waste of energy. Oh, you're ruminating, Ben. That's a waste of energy. And just eventually it's helped, along with writing and spending time with friends, and when I got a new job to sort of get progress going back into my career, I've managed to, I hope, managed to stop most of them out most of the time. Like, and I still sometimes fall back into bad habits, but the falling back, those setbacks are fewer and far between these days.
Yeah, I feel like that's pretty awesome that you can catch yourself now that you've like looked at the 12 things and you can identify them. If you do kind of fall back into that because you're a bit tired or whatever that week, you're like, oh, okay, this is just because of this thing. And now I know how to fix it. I'm going to go to the park run, or I'm going to go and, do run for resilience, or I'm going to go to the gym or whatever. So that's like pretty good. That's pretty good. Like,
well, and doing the run for resilience, so that'll give me a short-term boost of energy, but then I wasn't dealing with those like those ways of thinking, those wirings in my brain that were draining my energy. Yeah. So I could go and do that stuff and it made me feel good. And then eventually, the next day or later that day, when I started not feeling good, those ways of thinking would start draining me again. And it's only been this time now, like I'm injured. I've hardly exercised at all this year, but I feel as good as ever. And I used to run, like I would need to run minimum 30 Ks a week. Like otherwise I would fall in a heap. I was saying to my wife the other day, I'm like, babe, boy, I did a trail run the other week and I've blown like a bursa in my knee, so it's a bit swollen, and so just haven't run. But I remember saying to my wife recently, I've been injured twice this year and I actually like haven't felt that bad. Whereas in the past, it would have been like, oh, it would have been so bad if I was injured. I would have been in a really bad way. I think that's because I've dealt with a lot of those ways of thinking that was draining my energy. And I'm like, not just running's not the only way, to get my energy. Like, I'll go and do yoga with friends or stretch or whatever. Like there's more than just running now with friends. So I could talk about energy all day, mate.
I actually didn't think about a couple of things like that until you just said it. I was
what things? Just
the catastrophizing thing. Like I tend to catastrophize like quite a bit, and like I'm pretty lucky that my partner's like fairly patient, because you would have had it too when the doc was a small business and struggling. Like you bring a lot of that home to like your household, and now she'll call it out sometimes. She's like, I think you're catastrophizing here, and then I'll be like, oh yeah, I am. And then that in itself kind of like has helped me be like, whenever I am starting to do that, like identify it, and I'm like, okay, maybe everything isn't fucked. And it's just such
mountain and molehill, mate. That was bad for me. Like, as soon as one little thing happened, you just then like extrapolate forward everything else bad was going to happen, and my brain would jump straight to the end, like result of like, oh, the business is going to go under because one bad thing happened. My brain, but I put it back in my brain being tired that it couldn't like just jump straight to the end. It didn't have like the bandwidth to like consider that there's all these other steps along the way, and each step I could make another decision and try and course correct, and my brain would just jump to conclusions. I think because it's a tired brain. It just can't do the computation and the thinking, and it just when you're tired, your brain just does really crappy thinking. Like
Yeah.
I can't write at all if I'm tired.
Yeah. No, the journaling thing, like you and Sammy have both talked about that. I've seen it. I just like, I've never been disciplined enough to like keep persevering through the first week. And then you're like, and then as soon as you're tired, like it's that cycle again. And I was like, oh, well, you just got to kind of push through it, persevere, and then everything works out for the better. But, mate, thanks so
Or
much.
set the bar lower. I also set the bar lower.
Set the
If
bar
I miss
lower.
a day, I just go, well, if I miss today, I'll get on with it tomorrow.
I've got these like random post-it notes that I put all over my desk when people say like things like that to me, and they're just kind of like littered around my workspace. So set the bar lower is going to be the one for this week.
No, when my cousin used to always joke, he's like, aim low, achieve your goals. It was a big joke.
He's not wrong, for the record. So if you're listening to this and it resonates with you, or you think that you might want to learn more, like where can people come to contact you and sort of see a bit more about what you're working on now?
This is just benalexandertalks.com. It's my website. There's a link to my newsletter there, or my blog that Joel mentioned before. And I'm on Twitter, LinkedIn, all the usual sites. So yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, well, thank you so much for coming on. It's such an interesting topic. And I've definitely learned a couple of things. And now I just want to go find that 12-point list and see how many of them
I'll go and see if I can find it, and I'll take
yeah,
a
if you do, send it over and I'll put it in the links for the podcast. But yeah, mate, really appreciate you coming on. Thank you so much. And keep doing what you're doing, because there's a lot of awesome stuff that you're working on that's making a big impact for a lot of people in Canberra.
You too, Joel. Keep it up.